1847 Maple Street. The intake coordinator at MedFirst Urgent Care on Morse Road had been doing her job for a long time. She had the efficient, pleasant neutrality of someone who processes sick and injured people 8 hours a day and has learned to keep her face still regardless of what comes through the door. I watched her check in 3 people ahead of me without changing expression. When I slid my ID across the counter, she scanned it the same way she'd scanned the others. Then she stopped. It was subtle, the kind of pause you wouldn't notice unless you were standing close enough to see her eyes move from the screen to my face and back to the screen in a way that wasn't part of the routine. She typed something. She waited. She typed something else. "Mr. Haddon." She said it carefully, the way people say a name when they're not completely sure it belongs to the person in front of them. "Can you hold on one moment?" "Sure, I think I broke a finger. I can wait." She nodded, but she wasn't listening to me anymore. She picked up her desk phone, the landline, not the cell on her counter, turned slightly away from the window and spoke in a voice too low to hear. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March. I was 42 years old. I had broken my right ring finger pulling cable through a crawl space in a half-finished house in Westerville, working for a construction crew that paid me $19 an hour in cash and didn't ask about my license situation because they knew and I knew that my license situation was the same as my insurance situation, which was the same as my apartment situation, which was a room at the Crossroads extended stay on Cleveland Avenue that rented by the week for $389 and smelled like the previous tenant's decisions. I had a broken finger, and the woman behind the intake window had just made a phone call that was not about my broken finger. She came back to the window. "Mr. Haddon, I need to ask you to have a seat. Someone is going to come speak with you shortly." "Is this about insurance? I can pay out of pocket." "It's not about insurance," she paused. "Your social security number has a federal notation attached to it. I'm required by protocol to flag it when it surfaces. I'm sorry, I don't have more information than that." I sat down in a plastic chair next to a man holding a bag of frozen peas against his elbow and a woman with a toddler asleep across her lap, and I tried to think of what a federal notation on my social security number could possibly mean. I was an electrician. I had been an electrician for 20 years. I was not a person with federal notations. 40 minutes later, a man in a gray suit came through the front door and scanned the waiting room until he found me. I knew from the way he found me that he'd been told what I looked like. And I knew from the way he walked toward me that this wasn't a conversation about a billing discrepancy. "Cole Haddon," he showed me a badge. "I'm with the U.S. Marshals Service. I need to speak with you privately. Can you step outside?" The cold air hit me when we walked out. I was wearing a hoodie and work jeans and one of those foam finger splints from a 7-Eleven first aid kit. The marshal's name was Doherty. He was careful with his words in the way people are careful when they're standing at the edge of something they know they can't unsay. "Mr. Haddon, I'm going to ask you to come to the Columbus field office tomorrow morning. There's information that needs to be communicated to you regarding your identity. Your SSN has a WITSEC marker on it." Witness protection. "Yes, sir. The marker's been active since 1991. There's a case closure that's been formally initiated and there are assets involved. We've been trying to locate you for approximately 2 years." He paused. "I need you to understand you're not in any kind of trouble. This is a notification." "My name," I said. "My name is my name." He looked at me with an expression that was not quite pity and not quite anything else. "That's one of the things we need to discuss tomorrow morning. I want to tell you what I learned in that federal office. I want to tell you about Chicago and the Sorrentos and the alderman corruption ring that brought down 11 city officials in 1990 and the 3 flat on Maple Street in Wicker Park that had been sitting in a federal property trust for 33 years. But before I do, I need to tell you how I ended up at an urgent care clinic at 9:47 p.m. with a broken finger, no insurance, and a weekly room at an extended stay motel on Cleveland Avenue. Because the federal marker is the second half of the story. The first half is what Raymond Farrow spent 4 years building and finished in 18 months. My name is Cole Haddon. I was an electrician, not a handyman, not a guy who changes outlets, a licensed electrical contractor certified in commercial and residential work. I started Haddon Electric in 2007 with a cargo van, a toolbox my uncle lent me, and a reputation in the Columbus trades for showing up on time and not cutting corners on panel work. In Ohio, not cutting corners on panel work is a rarer quality than it should be. There are electricians who run wire the way some people live their lives, always finding the path that's faster and cheaper and fine until it isn't. I was not one of those electricians. I did it right. Every junction, every ground, every load calculation. I did it right because my name was on the permit and because the work you do inside a wall is the work nobody sees until the house burns down. By 2015, Haddon Electric had 11 employees and $1.3 million in annual revenue. We did new construction, commercial fit-outs, generator installations, service upgrades. I drove a Ford F-250 I owned outright. My hands were permanently calloused, my knees ached in the cold, and I could look at a breaker panel and know in 30 seconds what someone else would spend 2 hours figuring out. I was a tradesman in a college-educated economy, and I was proud of what I'd built, because I'd built it from nothing, and because the 11 people who worked for me had families depending on the fact that I showed up every day and did the work correctly. In 2011, I met Donna at a housewarming party for a client in Dublin, the suburb north of Columbus, where the houses get larger and the lawns get quieter, and the people have the particular ease of families who have never wondered whether the bills would get paid. Donna was 29. She was the kind of beautiful that doesn't announce itself. The kind you notice halfway through a conversation because you realize you've been paying more attention to her face than to what either of you is saying. She laughed at things that were actually funny. She had opinions that weren't just opinions her family had handed her. We talked for 2 hours at that party, and I called her 2 days later, which was sooner than I should have, but exactly when I wanted to. Her father was Raymond Farrow. I learned this on our third date. Raymond owned Farrow Commercial Properties, one of the largest commercial real estate management firms in central Ohio. He managed office parks, retail strips, industrial facilities. He did not build things. He owned the buildings where other people worked and collected the revenue their work generated. He was 61 when I met him, with the particular posture of a man who has never had to ask for anything twice. The dinner where I first sat across from Raymond was at his house in New Albany, the kind of suburb that exists to prove that money can be expressed in square footage. Donna's brother Kurt was there too, an attorney with his father's face and his father's silence, the kind of man who communicates contempt through stillness. Raymond sat at the head of the table and looked at me with the studied neutrality of a man who has already decided something, but is willing to hear the case before announcing the verdict. "Electrical contractor," he said, repeating the words back the way people repeat a phrase to demonstrate they heard it and found it smaller than expected. "Revenue? Good year last year, we're profitable and growing. But not significantly. I'd call it significant." He looked at me over his wine glass. "Cole, I'm going to say something that may sound harsh, but I think it's kinder to say it now. My daughter was raised a certain way. She has expectations, not about money specifically, but about what a life looks like. A small electrical company is a job. It's not a future that matches what Donna knows." Donna was sitting to my left. I felt her go still. "You seem like a capable man," Raymond continued, "but capable is not the same as suitable, and suitable is what my daughter deserves." Donna didn't say anything. She moved her fork from one side of her plate to the other. I noted it, the way you note something you don't yet know the name for but file away in the back of your mind where important things go to wait. We married anyway in September 2013. Our son Wyatt was born in 2014, our daughter June in 2016. For a while the children softened Raymond the way grandchildren sometimes soften men who can't be softened by anything else. He came to Wyatt's baseball games. He sent June a bicycle for her 5th birthday. He performed the grandfather role with the same calculated precision he performed every other role in his life. And underneath the performance, he was watching and waiting, doing math I couldn't see yet. The math became visible in 2019, when Raymond started calling Donna more. Not with demands, with observations. The business is too dependent on new construction cycles. Commercial margins are more stable. Have you thought about what happens if there's a slowdown? I know because Donna started repeating what he said, not as disagreement but as information, as though Raymond's assessments were weather reports that simply needed passing along. What he meant was this could still be ended. I kept building Haddon Electric the way I always had, carefully and correctly, and by 2021 we had 11 employees, $1.3 million in revenue, and more work than we could handle. Then Raymond began the other kind of building. The commercial contracts went first. Farrow Properties managed 14 buildings in the Columbus metro area. Haddon Electric held the service contracts on 3 of them. In October 2021, all 3 were terminated in the same week. The termination letters were identical in structure, different only in the building name. They shared the same law firm's letterhead at the bottom, Kurt's firm. The referrals dried up next. Raymond's network was extensive, and over the years, through Donna, through events, through the way money connects to money in a mid-sized city, I'd gotten work from people inside his orbit. That stream went quiet over the winter of 2021 without a single conversation or explanation. The phone just stopped ringing from certain directions. In March 2022, a complaint was filed with the Ohio Construction Industry Licensing Board, alleging that Haddon Electric had performed unlicensed work on a commercial job in Gahanna. The allegation was fabricated. I had the license, I had the permit, I had the city inspection sign-off. But a complaint triggers a review. A review triggers a license hold. A license hold means you can't pull new permits. And if you can't pull new permits, you can't start new jobs. And if you can't start new jobs, your 11 employees start making phone calls to other companies. The review took 7 months. 7 months is a long time in a small construction company. By the time the board cleared me, full clearance, complaint dismissed, no violations, no findings, I had 4 employees left. Revenue had dropped to $280,000. The insurance had lapsed. The loan I'd taken out to cover payroll during the hold sat at 14% interest. And Donna, who had been drifting in a direction I hadn't wanted to name, filed for divorce in January 2023. Raymond's legal team handled it. They were thorough. Donna got the house, which Raymond had helped us buy and held a second lien on that I hadn't fully understood at signing. She got primary custody of Wyatt and June. She got the Accord. I got my truck, my tools, the cargo van with the bad transmission, and $11,000. The $11,000 lasted about 2 months. I worked side jobs, cash electrical work, unlicensed, the kind where the homeowner knows they're getting a deal and the electrician knows he's getting by. I made $700, $800 a week. I paid what I could of child support. I ate at places with a dollar menu. I showered every day because that was the thing I would not give up. There's a version of rock bottom where you still maintain the small dignities, and the small dignities are what keep rock bottom from becoming the whole floor. I saw Wyatt and June every other weekend. I picked them up in the cargo van, which I'd cleaned and vacuumed and hung a Pine air freshener in. Wyatt was 13, old enough to see everything and smart enough to ask about half of it. "Dad, where are you staying?" "Extended stay over on Cleveland, it's fine." "Is it like a hotel?" "It's like a hotel." "Do you have a kitchen?" "I have a microwave." He absorbed this the way Wyatt absorbed things, quietly, filing it away. He was 13 and already building the whole picture in his mind: the grandfather who disapproved, the mother who chose a side, the father who lost the company, trying to figure out who to be angry at and not quite landing anywhere because he wasn't yet sure who deserved it. June was 9. She didn't ask about the hotel. She asked if we could go to Schiller Park because there was sometimes a dog show on Saturdays and she wanted to see the dogs. We went. We saw 3 Bernese mountain dogs and a corgi she said was the best animal she'd ever seen in real life. She held my hand while we walked. She told me about a book she was reading at school and a disagreement with her best friend that had resolved itself by Wednesday. She was 9, and the world was still a place where disagreements resolved by Wednesday, and I was glad for that. That was my life for 14 months, a weekly room, a cargo van, a microwave, and Schiller Park every other Saturday, until I pulled cable in a crawl space in Westerville and heard something snap in my right hand that I knew immediately wasn't a sprain. The morning after the marshal came to the urgent care parking lot, I sat in a conference room at the U.S. Marshal's Service Field Office on East Broad Street in Columbus. The woman across from me was Deputy Marshal Sandra Pruitt, 51, WITSEC case coordinator, with the composed manner of someone who has spent a career delivering information that rearranges people's lives and has learned to do it clearly and without performance. "Mr. Haddon," she said, or more precisely, "Mr. Sorrento, I want to walk you through this carefully. Some of what I'm going to tell you is going to be difficult to absorb." I'd slept 2 hours. I'd reset the finger myself with a proper pharmacy splint and 2 Advil. I had my coffee. I was as ready as I was going to be. "Take your time," I said. She opened the folder. "Your birth name is Marco Sorrento. You were born March 4, 1983 at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, Illinois. Your parents were Victor Sorrento and Nina Sorrento, née Bautista. You were relocated under the Witness Security Program to Columbus, Ohio in the spring of 1991 when you were 7. The names Cole and Diane Haddon were assigned to your parents. Cole was retained as your first name to ease your transition. Your parents were instructed that full disclosure wasn't appropriate given your age. My parents were Bill and Diane Haddon of Worthington, Ohio. My father was an account manager at a wholesale supply company. My mother taught 2nd grade in elementary school on High Street. They were steady, quiet people who went to church on Sundays, drove sensible cars, and attended every school event I was ever in. My father died in 2009, a month after I started the business, a brain aneurysm on a Wednesday afternoon in February. My mother died in 2020 during the 2nd month of the pandemic, a heart attack at 71 while she was alone in the house they'd bought in 1991 for $127,000. They never told me anything, not once. "What happened?" I asked. "Why were we relocated?" Sandra turned a page. "Your father, Victor, worked as a financial analyst for a city contracts firm in Chicago. Beginning in the late 1980s, a network of aldermen and city officials was using the contract system to route public funds into private accounts, overbilled contracts, ghost vendors, inflated project costs. The FBI estimated the scheme diverted approximately $48 million over 6 years. $48 million. Your father discovered the discrepancy internally. He wasn't part of the scheme and didn't benefit from it. He brought his findings to the FBI in 1989 and cooperated for 14 months, providing documentation, grand jury testimony, and assistance building the RICO case. His testimony led to the indictment and conviction of 11 individuals, including 2 aldermen, a deputy commissioner, and several contractors with organized crime connections. My father, the account manager who drove a Honda Accord, coached my little league team for 1 season, and always smelled like Irish Springs soap, had walked into a federal building and handed over evidence against 11 people stealing public money, then walked out of his entire life. There were credible threats made against your father and your family prior to the relocation, Sandra said. 2 of the indicted individuals had direct organized crime connections. The decision to enter WITSEC was made quickly, within weeks of the final grand jury session. They threatened me specifically. She was quiet for a moment. The case file indicates a specific threat was made against you. You were 7 years old. I sat with that, 7 years old. Someone had looked at my father and told him his 7-year-old son was a bargaining chip, and my father had testified anyway, then packed our lives into boxes, driven to Ohio, and never said a word. Why did the flag surface now, I asked. Cops have run my license before over the years. Nothing ever came up. Sandra nodded. That's an important question, and I want to answer it directly. Your SSN has carried the WITSEC marker since 1991, but it was tiered. For the first 20-some years, it was a passive marker, a code that only surfaced if directly cross-referenced against the WITSEC database itself. Routine checks, driver's license lookups, standard criminal background scans, they don't run that cross-reference. In 2019, when the case formally moved toward closure proceedings, the Marshal's Service upgraded the marker to an active alert on all federal-linked identity checks. Medical billing systems that process uninsured patients run through a federal identity verification layer as part of CMS compliance requirements. When you checked in without insurance, the system defaulted to that federal scan. That's what surfaced the alert. That was the answer the logic held, and I needed it to hold. The second reason, she continued, is that we've been actively trying to locate you for 2 years. The last surviving defendant whose conviction relied directly on your father's testimony was released from federal custody in December 2022. The case is formally closed. There are assets. She laid a summary sheet on the table. I want to tell you what was on that page the way it was told to me, item by item, because that's how it landed, one number at a time, in a way my mind could try to process. Item 1, the Sorrento family residence at 1847 Maple Street, Wicker Park, Chicago, a 3-flat gray stone building my parents bought in 1988 for $162,000, maintained by a federal property trust since 1991, current market value approximately $2.3 million. I had never been to Chicago. Item 2, a life insurance policy on my father's life, face value $400,000, paid out on his death in 2009, proceeds held in trust with 15 years of accumulated interest, approximately $590,000. My father died, a life insurance policy paid out, and the money went into a federal trust while I borrowed against my company to cover payroll. Item 3, a savings account held in the Sorrento name at a Chicago bank, balance at the time of relocation $54,000 with 33 years of compounded interest, approximately $194,000. Item 4, federal victim restitution allocation. My father's cooperation in the RICO prosecution entitled the Sorrento family to a portion of the assets seized from the criminal enterprise, a total seizure of approximately $22 million. The restitution allocation to my father's family, $1.3 million held in federal trust pending case closure. Total assets awaiting transfer to you as sole surviving heir of Victor and Nina Sorrento, approximately $4.4 million. I looked at the paper. I looked at Sandra Pruitt, who had the specific stillness of someone who's delivered this kind of information before and knows the right response is simply to be quiet. My right hand throbbed inside the splint. I had a broken finger, $4.4 million, a name I'd never heard, and a father who died in 2009 without ever telling me that the life we lived in Ohio was the second draft. There's one more item, Sandra said. Not financial. She set a sealed box on the table, a Marshal's Service evidence tag on the side. When your family entered WITSEC in 1991, they were required to surrender all physical materials that could identify them as the Sorrento family. These have been held in federal storage. With the case closed, they belong to you. I opened the box. Photographs. My mother, dark-haired and young, standing on a stoop in front of a building I now owned but had never seen, squinting into what looked like a summer afternoon. My father at a baseball game, wearing a Cubs jacket, laughing at something off-camera with the loose, unguarded laugh of a man who doesn't yet know what's coming. A photograph of the 3 of us, me at maybe 5 or 6 in front of a Christmas tree wearing a sweater slightly too big. My mother had a hand on my shoulder, my father knelt beside me. We looked like a family that didn't know it was about to stop existing. There was a baptismal certificate, Marco Victor Sorrento, a church on Chicago's North Side, 1983. And at the bottom of the box, an envelope. My father's handwriting on the front, not the handwriting of Bill Haddon, which I knew from birthday cards and grocery lists, and the note he left on the kitchen counter the morning he died that just said gone to get coffee back soon. This was different. The handwriting of Victor Sorrento, a man who'd grown up in Chicago and learned to write there under a name he'd had to give up. I opened it. Cole. That name is the only part of you we kept. I hope you still go by it. I hope it still fits you. If you're reading this, the case is closed and the marshals found you, and I'm probably gone. Your mother is probably gone too, and you've just learned that the names we gave you for your whole life were names the government gave us. I need to explain that, even though a letter isn't the same as a conversation, and a conversation is what I should have given you and didn't. In 1990, 2 men came to our apartment on Maple Street. They weren't police. They didn't show badges. They sat in our kitchen and told me that if I continued cooperating with the federal investigation, I wouldn't be the one who suffered for it. They were specific about what they meant. They said your name. They said your school. They described what you were wearing that morning. You were 7 and asleep upstairs, and they'd been watching you, and they said your name in our kitchen to let me know how close they could get. I testified the next morning. I testified because the alternative was to spend the rest of my life looking away from something I knew was wrong, because $48 million stolen from the city of Chicago is $48 million that doesn't go to schools and roads and firehouses and everything else regular people depend on, while the people doing the stealing sit at fundraisers and shake hands. Because someone had to be the person who didn't look away, and because the marshals promised they'd protect us, all 3 of us, and they kept that promise. We gave up the apartment and the neighborhood and our families. Your grandmother on my side died in 1997, and I couldn't go to the funeral. Your mother's sister moved to Portland in 2003, and your mother couldn't call her, couldn't write to her, couldn't tell her we were alive. Your mother missed her sister every day for the rest of her life and never said so in front of you, because the grief she carried was too expensive to spend. We weren't brave in the way people mean when they use that word easily. We were scared most of the time. We did what we did because you were 7 years old and someone had said your name in our kitchen, and there was nothing we wouldn't give up after that. The building on Maple Street is yours. The money is yours. The name Sorrento is yours if you want it. You've been Cole Haddon for 35 years. You're allowed to stay that way. The name was always meant to protect you, not to replace you. The only thing I want you to know, the thing I should have said when I was alive and present and your father in the room instead of a letter in a box, is this: the life we built in Columbus was not a lesser version of the life we gave up. It was the life we chose to build so you could be safe inside it. Every Little League game, every Sunday morning, every ordinary thing was a thing we chose on purpose. We chose it over a neighborhood and a building and a name because you were worth more than all of those things combined, and we'd make that trade again, without hesitation every single time. Do good work, take care of your kids. I love you. Dad, Victor Sorrento. I sat in the conference room of the U.S. Marshals Service Field Office in Columbus and held a letter from my father. Not from Bill Haddon, who I'd buried in a cemetery in Worthington in February of 2009, while my brand new business was 30 days old. From Victor Sorrento, a financial analyst from Chicago who'd found $48 million of fraud in city contracts and decided the right thing to do with that knowledge was walk into a federal building and hand it over, then walk out his entire life and raise his son in Ohio under a different name, never explain why, go to every single baseball game, and die without ever letting the secret slip once. I had thought he was ordinary. I had loved him as an ordinary man. I had grieved him as an ordinary man. He was not ordinary. He was the kind of person the rest of us only manage to be when we're not actually tested. I left the marshal's office at 3:30 that afternoon. I sat in the cargo van in the parking lot on East Broad Street with the box on the passenger seat and looked at the Columbus skyline, the city I'd lived in my whole conscious life, the city my parents had chosen on a map because it was far enough from Chicago and large enough to disappear into, and I called my kids. Wyatt picked up on the 3rd ring. Hey, buddy. You sound weird. You okay? Something happened, something big. I'll tell you about it when I see you Saturday. Big bad or big good? Big good, really big good. Are you getting a real apartment? Better than an apartment, I'll explain Saturday. He paused. Dad. Yeah. I'm glad it's good big. Me too, buddy. June got on because Wyatt handed her the phone. She told me about a corgi she'd seen at the park on Sunday with her mother, different from the corgi at Schiller. She wanted me to know. This one had a spot on its left ear. I told her that sounded like an excellent corgi. She said she'd decided she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. I told her that was a great idea. She said she also wanted to be an artist. I told her she could be both. She asked if she could have a dog when I got a house. I told her yes. That was the moment I cried, not in the conference room, not in the parking lot. I cried on the phone with my 9-year-old daughter because she wanted a dog and I had just learned I could give her one. 6 months have passed. It's September now, the kind of Ohio September that can't decide between summer and fall, warm days and cool mornings, and that particular slant of afternoon light that means the year is turning. The asset transfer took 4 months. Federal trusts, estate filings, identity verification, the particular bureaucracy of a government that is very careful about releasing $4.4 million to a man who legally didn't exist under that name the day before. My legal name is now Marco Cole Sorrento. I kept Cole as the name I use because I've been Cole for 35 years and names are the clothes your history wears, and I'm not ready to change all of them yet. Maybe someday. The 3-flat on Maple Street appraised at $2.4 million. The Chicago market had moved between March and July the way markets move when you're not watching, which is upward. I flew to Chicago in June for the first time in my life. I took a cab from O'Hare to Wicker Park, to Maple Street to 1847, and stood on the sidewalk in front of a 3-story gray stone with a front stoop and bay windows and ironwork railings nobody does anymore, looking at a building where my parents had been young and scared and braver than I'd known to appreciate, where I'd learned to walk, and that I wouldn't have been able to find on a map 5 months earlier. The interior had been maintained by the trust, not renovated, maintained. Same floors, same kitchen where 2 men had once come to threaten my father and where he'd decided what kind of man he was going to be. The rear unit had a small backyard enclosed, a city yard 8 feet by 20, with a raised bed my mother had built in 1989 and that had gone untended for 33 years but hadn't died. Overgrown, yes. Full of weeds, yes. But the rosemary she'd planted was still there, woody, gray-stemmed, leggy but alive, still putting out new growth at the tips, still drawing on whatever she'd put into that soil decades ago. I'm an electrician, I understand circuits, and what I know about electricity is that a wire that's been disconnected for a long time is still a wire. The copper doesn't stop being copper, the capacity doesn't go away. You just have to find the ends and close the connection, and the current moves again like it was never interrupted. I'm not selling the building, I'm going to restore it. Because it isn't a real estate asset, it's the place where my parents made the choice that determined who I would be. You don't sell that. I bought a house in Columbus, 3 bedrooms on Bryden Road near Franklin Park, $340,000, nothing grand, a yard in back, a porch in front, a furnace I installed myself, because I'm an electrician and I know enough to do it right, and because after 14 months in a weekly motel, installing a furnace in my own house was the most satisfying work I'd done in years. Wyatt has a room, June has a room, June's room has 1 purple wall and 1 green wall, because those are the colors she chose and I told her any color she wanted and meant it. Custody is now 50-50. Donna didn't contest it. I think she's relieved, though I can't know that for certain. I think some part of her understands what her father did and can't say so directly, and expresses it instead through being civil at pickups in a way she wasn't 6 months ago. We haven't spoken about any of it. The marriage is over. The story is mine. Raymond knows. I know because Kurt called me in May, the first time he'd contacted me since he filed the contracting board complaint that froze my license and killed my business. Cole, he said it like we talked every week. I heard something about a federal situation, some kind of inheritance. Kurt. I'm asking as family. We're not family. You made sure of that when you drafted a false complaint and filed it with the licensing board. You know it was false. I know it was false. The board found no violations. Complaint dismissed. I was just. We're done, Kurt. Don't call again. He didn't. Raymond hasn't called at all. Raymond is a man who measures everything by what he can calculate, and he can't calculate what to do with a situation where the electrician he spent 4 years systematically destroying turned out to be the son of a man who testified against an organized crime-connected corruption ring and left his son $4.4 million in federal trust. There's no move in that situation. So Raymond, who always has a move, has made none, and the silence from New Albany is the most satisfying thing I've heard in a long time. I restarted the business 2 months ago, not Haddon Electric. That name belonged to a man I'm still in the process of becoming someone different from, and the process takes time, but it's underway. The new company is Sorrento Electric. Just me right now and a new cargo van, a 2024 Transit I paid cash for. That doesn't smell like the previous tenant's decisions, because I'm the only tenant it's ever had. The first call came last week. A homeowner in Bexley needed a full panel upgrade and had been told by 2 other companies it'd be a 6-week wait. You're Sorrento Electric? I haven't heard of you. We're new, but I've been doing this for 20 years. Any references? Plenty, and I'll pull the permit correctly, show up when I say I will, and charge you exactly what I quoted. She thought about it a moment. Thursday works. Thursday. Same answer I've given for 20 years. Thursday, I'll be there, tools in the truck, permit in hand, doing the work right because my name is on it, because the work inside the wall is the work nobody sees until something goes wrong, and I've never been the electrician who bets on nothing going wrong. Raymond Farrow sat at his dining room table in New Albany in 2011 and looked at me and said that capable wasn't the same as suitable, and that his daughter deserved more than a man who wired other people's houses. He was looking at the son of Victor Sorrento, and he didn't know it. He saw calloused hands and a cargo van and made his calculation, and his calculation was wrong, not because of the money, not because of the building on Maple Street, but because he was measuring the wrong thing. He was measuring what I owned. He should have been measuring who made me. Victor Sorrento didn't protect his assets. He protected his family. I know which one I am, and I know which one my kids are going to grow up knowing their grandfather was. The life my father left behind in Chicago wasn't barren. He planted things even in the soil he was about to abandon, and the son he raised in Ohio, who spent 20 years learning to run current through walls other people built, who understands that the work nobody sees is the work that keeps everything from burning down, is the thing that grew. Drop a comment below. I read everyone. If this story reached something real in you, share it with someone who's been told they're not enough. Someone building something in the dark, someone sitting in a weekly motel who doesn't yet know that the wire is still good, the circuit is still there, and all it takes is closing the connection. Hit like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.